In this series, lowimpact.org talks with people working to build a mutually owned, democratic, decentralised economy that builds community and doesn't destroy nature. We want to increase collaboration to bring about system change. Find links to the sites mentioned in the videos in the description below. Join the conversation by liking, commenting and subscribing to our channel.
Hi, today I'm talking with Michael Linton. He's the inventor of LETS, the moneyless exchange system, and he's got a new idea I want to talk about as well. Hello, Michael.
Hello, Dave.
So, Michael, I've just been reading a paper by Jem Bendell and Matthew Slater about complementary currencies, and they quote Bernard Lietaer, and he said, though numerous examples can be found in history, the modern complementary currency movement really began with the publication of the LETSystem design manual and the popularization of local exchange trading systems, LETS, in the West in the late 1980s. So you're the father of the modern complementary currency movement then, because you wrote that design manual, didn't you?
Angus Souter, Chris Knights were instrumental in writing it, but it was the design, as we had circulated by 85, 86, we were circulating the basic design of the LET system, and that was largely my authorship with a lot of input from friends and neighbors, you know. But yeah. Now, of course, I regard the complementary word as a little questionable. I've always argued about that. It seems to suggest that the conventional legal tender is prime, is the absolute, is the standard. And I regard conventional legal tender as a regressive, degenerate system, just a sideline in the manner of history. And money is bigger than legal tender. And the LET system was, I think, our first appreciation of the possibility.
So could you tell us a bit about LETS at the beginning? So there's sort of a bit of your background and how you got to the point of having the idea, and how you had the idea and wrote the manual, and how did that all come about?
By accident, a series of accidents. It's like Winnie the Pooh discovered the North Pole. I think you will remember. They were looking for something to fish Eeyore out of the river, and he tripped over this thing, and it turned out to be the North Pole. And that's how Winnie the Pooh discovered the North Pole. Similarly, I came across LETSystems by accident, because we were out of money in my community, west coast of Canada, a small town of about 40,000 people at that stage. And this was in 1982, when the bank rates suddenly went sky high, about 14% for interbank prime. So conventional money was mortgages 18%. Well, you know, everything hit the wall. No money, no nothing. So a group of us were looking at, well, how do we network? How do we, because we're not lost anything that we had. We had our tools, our skills, our needs, you know, our surplus in here, time there. How do we move it? And we created a little buy and sell list, because there was a little computer in town, a little computer, a Microsoft 2500, used CPM software, 8-inch floppy disks that could hold a whole 64K, my friend, 64K on one 8-inch floppy. Hallelujah, the future is here. So we were doing our processing of a simple list of offers and requests.
When you say we, who were these other people, and how did you know them?
We were all part of a sort of study group that was exploring the issue of what the hell's going on. It was a sort of a men's group, women's group, network group, that our focus at that point was, what's money doing? And this was crucial, because we realized money was the thing we didn't have. How do we bring money into this process to make things match? The first problem we had was thinking, well, how much money do we give ourselves? You know, we realized it was a money that was being created by nothing, out of nothing. So how much was a good number? And the first figure was sort of 1,000 each. But that really seemed a little precarious, you know, like, why 1,000? For the children? Do the children get 1,000? You know, is there any differential for seniors, for aged, for need, for what? So the allocation was a big problem. Who gets it? How much? And we thought 1,000 is too much, back to 100. 100? Too little. What can you do with $100? You know, an hour or two's this or that. So there were these arguments about 1,000 or 100. And basically, just hold on. We've got none. Let's start at zero. If we start at zero, there is no money, which is the reality. We had none. We had no gold to put behind it. We had no savings or assets in those senses. We had just our own commitment. So let's start at zero. And when something happens between two people, one acknowledges the other's gift of the haircut, the fence posts, the childcare, the dental work, whatever. There's an acknowledgement of the given, the gift, because there's a thing has happened. Who says? And that was it, basically. Do and pay. So the lead system was that there was a declaration between two of move the obligation, you know, pay it forward in pattern. Now, these are key issues. One is that it's a declaration, that it's a pay it forward, right? It's up to you to do something. I'm not going to force you, right? So it's very mind your own business context. But principally that it's in a network. It's in a circulation. Now, that was what we at the time called mutual credit. LETSystem was one specific variant of that insisted on no service fees, no interest, and use the legal tender as the measure. We recognized that you could use hours in this context. Time banks were already in process. So there was no question of who's winning what. It was just, how do you move this in different ways, in different forms? So the lead system was legal tender, no interest, no cost of service, no credit limits. It was a self-enabling network of whatever size people chose to have in this to and fro, give and get circulation model. That's it.
So you had the idea of, you didn't just want to use it yourself, did you? You wanted to spread the idea and yeah, spread it around the world?
Well, very quickly, we saw that this was a very movable toy. This was something that could be picked up in any place very quickly, if it was, and people heard about it and wanted to play with it. So we started a few conversations up and down Vancouver Island, Victoria, the Salt Spring Island group, people in the Nanaimo, people in the Ladysmith. You know, we just started these conversations, and then they shifted to Vancouver, and then documents started moving around. And then we heard that somebody in New Zealand had talked about systems in Britain that we didn't know about. And it turned out that was a bit of a fiction. The guy in New Zealand was a visitor from Vancouver who started speaking in New Zealand about these networks, and these networks started there. Then we got picked up by permaculture. Unbeknownst to me, I'd met Bill Mollison at my first presentation on LETSystems at the North American Bioregional Congress in Kansas in 1984, May. And one of the people in the little group that included Tom Greco and Thomas Berry and his brother James Berry, quite an august little group, was this guy Bill Mollison that I knew nothing about. Well, he liked what the concept was included in the permaculture design manual, and in fact sent some of his people to come and stay with us in Comox Valley for a few weeks and see how it worked. They were the only people who ever did that, incidentally. We had visiting academics, but we did not get much come and see stuff over decades. But I ramble on.
But you, so tell us about the manual. How did that come about?
Well, the first manual was very simple. It was just a set of agreements. The manual resides in what do the participants in this network understand themselves to be participating in. So the first thing was the user agreements. And they were basically, look, this is measured as $1. We think of as $1. We take each other seriously. And we're not obliged to trade. That was the key thing. Not obliged to trade. It was not a command system. It was a let system, an enabler, a permitter, a give space, give opportunity package. And that's how we've always configured it and seen it. And advocated its administration and development. Not very successfully, however. Most developments have been.
That's what I want to talk about next. I mean, what happened and what your perspective is on that. I just wanted to slot something in though, because the last person I spoke to, the last interview I did was with Will Ruddick in Africa.
Yeah.
And he said something very different to what you just said, which was, why worry about how much to allocate somebody? Why not just start at zero, because we didn't have any money? Now his position is that, I guess it's not what people are used to. People are used to having positive numbers, not negative numbers. And negative numbers feels a bit like debt, and so they don't want to go there. What's your response to that?
Well, I don't think you get much going unless your map is actually an accurate representation of the territory. I really think condescending to misconception is bad idea in design. If you try and accommodate what you project as a problem onto a group of independent agents, don't be too surprised if it doesn't quite work as you expected. But I don't agree with them at all. Mm. You're turning something which is a relationship into a habitual token, an item, a thing. You've changed a verb of process into a noun of exclusion, identity, acquisition. I mean, all of it, I see, is just, if you don't encounter these issues where they matter, which is the experience of the individual in community. What am I in this for? What's in it for me? What's the deal? Yeah. And that's got to be brought at least to practical surface. Now, not heavily cogitized, philosophized, politicized, religiousized, none, but know what's going on. And this is my little local bank account and my little local money. And it might be 1,000 people, it might be 10,000 people, but
no, I just thought it was
I'm just in and out, you see. And it's about me going in and out in my environment of activity. And if I don't like how it's working, don't.
Yeah. No, I'll move on from that.
That's LETSystem is, you see, and it confers a responsibility on the people who are doing it to be responsible for their own behavior. And that's really the problem that most people run into.
Yeah. No, I just thought it was very interesting because, you know, it's taken off quite rapidly in Africa. And so,
well,
it is actually mutual credit. It's not commodity money. It's just moved the line forward a bit.
No. It is not just mutual credit because you move the line. Or maybe it is. Maybe that's the problem with the term mutual credit, that it's become so complementary to everything, which has been the biggest issue. I'm an engineer. I trained in physics and engineering. And I look at systemic definitions as relevant. You know, when you're building up an airplane or an engine or any functional unit, it's built in a way that it works and is tested and has limits and so on and so forth. Don't break the process. Read the manual. That's how things work. And I see so much untested willfulness offered into the world. It should be this way. We must learn to love one another and be helpful so that, you know, all these aspirations, the co-op movement will do anything but cooperate. Mm-hmm. And let's talk about the Rotary Club or the Chamber of Commerce, please. Let me tell you. So, you know, the aversion to change in experience is horrendous. Like people want it to be the way it already is. They don't want anything that rocks the boat. They feel themselves just hovering above the level of the water. If this is water, don't make a wave, you know? And you come in with something that says, look, you know, maybe if you just relax, take off the lead boots, you'd rise right out of this pool. You know? Don't interrupt. We're busy. We're busy keeping our heads above water. We're doing the best we can. Who are you to criticize us? you're not from here. You're not.
That metaphor, taking off your lead boots.
All that, yeah. Why not?
So back to the manual then. You're talking about the manual. What is your perspective on what happened with Let's? And why do you think it happened, and how do you feel about that?
I think the first thing is that it happened with Let's, not with LETSystem. We definitely documented, specified, published, and placed in trust the intellectual property of the LETSystem. The LETSystem Trust is the holder of those deeds in kind, and that was because we felt it was important that something had a proper definition, because we could see all sorts of things out there without definition at all. Here's a bus. I put wings on it. I call it a LETSystem. You know, it doesn't fly just because you put pieces on something else. You know, and we saw this LETS process propagating all over the place without much feedback. We didn't hear about things until maybe they were 6 months or 2 years into process. We heard that they'd formed committees. We heard that they'd created credit limits. We heard that they'd done this, that, and the other. We heard all sorts of added features, none of which made it work better, and some of which actually blocked it from working.
What kind of things blocked it from working? And I mean, what kind of ambitions did you have for LETSystems? And you know, what?
My background was originally physics engineering, but I worked in computers in the 60s, not from the 70s until the 80s. I took time out of computers during that period because I wasn't good at them. I was much more interested in business. I did a business degree. I worked on inner city development work in London. I was a school teacher in London. I looked at the change in processes in those places, and I found nothing that was going to work. Nothing that I could see was an intelligible response to the crisis that was emergent, was evident. Poverty, social distress, environmental processes, the whole damn thing. So I became an immigrant to the west coast of Canada to be out on the edge as this thing happened and see what went on. And I was out there passing the time when this collapse of the economy was occasioned by the Reaganomics, Margaret Thatcher, central bank interest, mortgages high, austerity, and profitability. Now, the whole game started at that point. When we saw the LETSystem, I saw that it was a universal relationship for civilized interaction between agents in community. I wouldn't have put it that way at that time. I just thought, this is a good idea, and it has its own legs. It's got legs that will work for a business community. Your sound is off, Dave. Your mic muted.
Oh, sorry. Did you know about the history of complementary currencies and mutual credit-like activities? Did it just come to you from out of the blue, or had you studied a lot about it?
We studied what we could, and we come across two significant issues. One was a thing called the time exchange, or the skills exchange in Reston, Virginia. And we found one of this through a sort of an old Mother Earth news or catalog or a library somewhere, whatever. Because as you know, there was not the internet in 1982. But we also heard quite a lot about commercial barter networks, business to business barter networks, which were very common across North America at that time, and were turning over about $2 billion a year was the aggregate for the maybe 20, 30 barter commercial business to business networks, which were all seen as centralized hubs with commission on transaction, and the guy at the center charging a commission to transact between the users. We reasoned that what they were doing for 15% paid in cash on every transaction could be done for about $1 and could be with an internal currency. So our models was basically, why have a conventional barter system when you can have one yourself? And it was basically because I was computer literate at that point, and there was a computer in town, a computer in the Comox Valley. And the woman who was spearheading that, who was running a hub office, she gave desk processing, reception, and word processing to clients from many offices in one place. Talk about being ahead of your time. She was 40 years ahead of her time with the only computer in town, Barb McKenzie. Marvelous. And she partnered with us in, yes, we've got a computer, we can run a database, we can do these things. So we can be a credit union on the spot. Credit union with no bricks. That's essentially what we were saying, except better than a credit union.
So
we realized what it was.
I want to try and get your perspective on what happened. Why didn't Let's take off and LETSystems change the world? What's your perspective?
Oh, bad replication was the primary. If people actually read the manual, followed the instructions, behaved intelligently, not added things in, and the principal things they added would be credit limits, democratic control, user fees, all the usual, oh yeah, but we got to have this. It wouldn't work unless the add-ons, you know? And the add-ons were all rigidities and breaks.
So you said credit limits and democratic control. So you see credit limits and democratic control as unnecessary or even negative?
Both. In terms of an average let system, I can see, now democratic control, I think is a complete fantasy world and fiction in the terms of it. The process of a let system is the interaction of the people who are doing it. That is what it is. It is a murmuration of a bunch of agents oscillating and interacting with each other. Manage that, mate. Don't get in the way and start telling what the flock of birds should be doing. Don't create a formation pattern. Don't issue memos, orders, and credit limits. Don't make them fly between a ceiling and a baseline. I mean, boom, boom, boom.
So if you don't do that, what would stop people?
Nothing, and it's not the issue. The question is, what's the damage anyway? Pay attention to the actual process rather than the fantasies. You don't have monsters under the bed here that aren't geeks in the cupboard. Relax. All the anxieties about what can go wrong are fantasy trips that are brought in by the carefulness, we are now handling other people's money, so we must be prudent. The Prudent Man Rule, remember the Prudent Man Rule? The Prudent Man Rule was that in the management of public funds in a charity or something, a director would be negligent or deficient or fraudulent if they did not handle the funds in the way that a prudent man would have handled them. The Prudent Man Rule for basically common law in such cases. And of course, what you mean is the collective unintelligence of the committee. You put a bunch of people together in one room with some sense of them having to do something, they will create another bicycle shed. You know, they've got something to do, and they do, and they add stuff on, and it's wrong. So committees, no thanks. But the committee function was instilled almost everywhere. And the credit limits, those were the two main ones, but also and we've got to have a central budget, so let's put a commission on, or a charge, or an annual fee. An annual fee would be a really good idea, because after all, how are we going to keep the photocopier, or there were photocopiers coming into the world these days, you know? So those issues, funding, control, and fear.
How would those things have caused failure? They might have been.
Which one? The annual commission, the fee, the organization, the democratic voting? Give me a break. They all stifled. They are all deadhead, non-events, dead weights. Stick it on the edge. You missed the point. If you're going down any of those routes, you've missed the point. You're trying to revive roadkill after you smacked it into the ground.
I'd like to tease some more out of you about this, because
you don't think I'm being explicit enough?
Explicit, but why do those things cause failure? Tell me more about why you think those things cause failure?
Well, I can give you a metaphor, simple metaphor. If you're taking a child on a bicycle for the first time, they are naturally going to tend to want to go slowly and freeze. Don't go fast because that feels dangerous. And when in doubt, freeze at the steering, the handlebars, fix the handlebars. Now those two are a recipe for fall on your ear. You can't not fall over if you freeze the steering and go slowly. You can, the two of them, each of them independently is an end. Put them together and you're down flat. So Douglas Engelbart, who's the father of modern computing, taught his kids to ride the bicycle by getting them on a real bike with handlebars and saying, now you do this, you just sit there and keep handlebars moving and I will keep you upright by holding the saddle and I will make sure that you're stable. And if you keep moving the handlebars, I will move forward while I keep you upright. So you keep the handlebars moving, he would move. If they stopped, he would stop. So if they stopped oscillating the handlebars, he would stop moving. Now, what happens because they persist in one and are subject to the other is that they feel the sway and the steering and the integration of their body movement, and the balance becomes persistent. And this is a cybernetic feedback loop of experience and process. And that's how you learn to ride a bike. And Douglas Engelbart said he could get his kids riding a bike in 4 or 5 minutes this way. I think that would be typical. My kids, I was teaching them on run bikes 40, 50 years ago. You know, strip off the saddle, strip off the pedals, wrap a towel around it, waddle around until you're so fed up with it, you want a saddle and pedals. And it took no time. It's the people who teach with training wheels that stop the kids from being able to ride bikes. Now, the first LETSystem were stuck with training wheels, with square wheels. They used to lock the wheels so it went slower. They want more friction, so this thing get away on us, right? So we can't have this thing moving too fast. And credit limits were a fantasy of the democratically elected committee that felt it was responsible for everybody else's behavior. We'll tell them what to do.
So what would stop people going too far into the negative or indeed
well,
into the positive?
The first thing is that in any community, you know who's up and who's down and who's behaving. And it's a social process of awareness. So first off, what would stop somebody from pissing around in his own patch?
Reputation.
Like he cares. If he doesn't care, it won't. If he does, it will.
Right.
Yeah. And the second thing is, what is the damage caused by somebody defecting in some way? The so-called Easy Rider program. What happens when somebody stops or quits? And there's this catastrophic expectation that a couple of bad apples in the barrel will bring us all down. We'll all go to rotten hell. And the system cannot survive because if somebody is not doing what they're told or their credit has gone sour and they've left town, if we didn't get them to center their account back to zero before they left, so there's all these injunctions in other people's agreements about thou shalt come back to zero on a regular basis, or if you don't come back to zero, we can sue you. That was a real goodie. That one was a great concession to security and satisfaction. So it stops, it freezes, it creates an atmosphere of rectitude, which is not right anyway. The best you'll get is a marching dance band. You won't get any music.
So from the beginning, did you see communities as separate, or did you see them being linked and so they could trade between each other?
We always saw this as scaling. Let's not get stuck in the concept of how. The point is, does it scale? Yes. From the very beginning, I saw, and there's the only reason I put time and energy into it, I put about 6 months into trying to analyze how it could crash, who could stop it, who could block it. Was it contrary to any legal regulations, taxation, accountancy? Would it infringe upon the Bank Acts, the security stuff? Could it be stopped by an organized cabal of the usual suspects?
So how did you see it scaling? Was it by
effortlessly?
Different?
Absolutely effortless.
But was it by different communities? Was it by different communities trading with each other?
No.
How then? How would it scale if not for that?
It would scale because it worked. This is the first thing, and this is the thing that people keep losing. If your independent community network is not thriving, it is not going to persist. Even if there's 45 of them and they're all tied together in an international cabal of some sort. The thing itself must have energy, vitality, self-maintenance. It must be a viable thing. Even if it's 20 people doing a childcare or a bunch doing a card swap or a tool exchange or an agricultural project, whatever size and function it is, if it doesn't serve a function, get it out, done, forget it, it's dead, it is not real, right? So show me what it doesn't apply to.
Yeah, I mean,
if you see that it's a vitality, then it's good for a chamber of commerce. It's good for a central housing, community housing project. It's good for a farm security network. It's good for any network of interaction between any bunches of agents. Now, I was a businessman. I have an MBA. I understand systems theory. I'd been studying Stafford beer for about 7 or 8 years by the time this dawned on me. And studying Stafford beer, who can do that? Well, certain people can, but not me. But like, I was primed to get this. And it said, this is a universal, not antidote, but orthogonal relationship to the status quo. The status quo is you're fucked. Money is just theirs and you get it if you're lucky and you do what you're told. Welcome to the old game.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Now,
yeah.
Here we suddenly have something that isn't that, is not that. It's a let system. It enables people to exchange, businesses to exchange, networks to exchange, businesses to exchange to municipal governments to be participating in federal networks. It enables any networking you want.
Within one system, within one community.
Every community is a community. If you take one of those spinning globes of 8 billion points of light or something, or even a smaller one, have one for your locality. London, Greater London Metropolitan, well, 5 million pins spinning around. What are the possible connections that would serve any subsets of that group of 6 million or whatever? I mean, how many networks are possible in the Greater London place? It's an intangible, you couldn't possibly account it. So it's not about how many can we have, it's, is there an edge to this? And it's a propagating high variety matching package. That's the point.
Okay, let's just break it down to somebody. Let's break it down to somebody.
To what's there, not tries to put something there to have things attracted to it.
Let's break it down for somebody who hasn't come across this before. Just make it really simple. So I'm part of a let system in London. I go to Manchester. Can I buy anything in Manchester?
With what money?
In the let system.
Which let system? The London let system, the Manchester let system?
That's what I'm asking you. How do I buy something in Manchester if I'm part of the...
You can spend money in any system you are in. You are in. If you're in a system, you can spend money in it. Now, what I keep seeing is people thinking, look, I've put my time in London. Now I want to go to Bognor Regis or down to Brighton. Can I spend my money in Brighton? And you see, that's the old thinking. I got it. It's powerful. I earned it. It's mine. I can do what I want with it. So I shall go somewhere and have it. Now, that's not what this is about. This is not a pump engine for people to take stuff to some other place. But it's commonly seen as that would be a good thing to have. So the question I got to ask you is, why aren't you in the Manchester system? Right,
so people would be in lots of different systems.
Well, we're taking you're in London and Manchester. Why aren't you in the Manchester system?
So if I have family in Manchester and I go to Manchester regularly, I would want to be in the Manchester system, wouldn't I?
Yeah. And like, what is your behavior in Manchester? Who gives a shit what you do in London? What do you do in Manchester? What should give and get there? So be where you are, do what you do, be a contributor. That's the name of the game. And I keep hearing this, but we've got to keep the exchange rate solid, the transfer, so that we can do all this, so that the person.
That's what I want to ask you. Yeah, that's what I want to ask you. How does that work? But okay. So again, really simply for a beginner, I go to Manchester. I'm not doing any work in Manchester. I'm not producing anything for anybody in Manchester.
Then you probably have to buy the local money from one of the trade shops. You probably have to put some money into Manchester project. You know, you'd be feeding the homeless. You'd be painting the walls.
But I couldn't put LETS units in. I couldn't put.
Well, who in Manchester needs LETS units in London? They've got LETS units where they are.
If they travel to London and they want to buy something in London.
Well, but then we go to London, they'd better do something in London, you see. So the issue is, I mean, there will be total exchange. There'll be plenty of people doing a fiddle in the middle, right? You know what I mean.
They'll work out some ways to do it somehow.
Oh yeah, and cheap.
Right, okay, so things will spring up.
Well, yeah, like nothing is impermeable. So you've got leakage out of any network. Now, are you encouraging that leakage? Are you installing that leakage? Are you creating a pressure gradient that is counter to that leakage? Now, I like the pressure gradient because I've never seen a way of keeping the stuff in if it wants to get out. So the question is, what is the vitalities of the individual systems and how do they manage? And you don't get them managing by punching holes in them to link them back into some great hydraulic suck set.
Right, so LETS didn't go that way at all, did it? It didn't go anything like you first suggested.
No.
But it limited the democratic control. It had the separate systems that were trying to build into trading networks, when there all sorts of things like that.
Yeah, everything was related to a conventional expectation of organization, propriety. How do you do this right? You know, and people wanted to do it right. Nobody wanted to do it wrong, right? It wasn't an opportunity for any scam merchant. There weren't fraud guys cruising around us. But so it was generally church hall and working men's association. It was the service clubs of a small town in some place. It was the knitting circle from another place. It was a punk group in Sydney. You know, it's like, who's formed it? Well, they want to do it right, so they tried to do it right, and that meant be careful, and that's like wrong.
You couldn't have forced people to follow the manual to the letter, though, could you?
Well, we couldn't excite them to. We couldn't. We did have the proposition that if there was a lot of groups that were doing the same thing, it would be good. Therefore, why don't we? And there was a potential for people to send $100 registration fee, that sort of thing. I don't think we got more than half a dozen of those over 10 years. So there wasn't a network. There wasn't a channel of to and fro. There wasn't a way to get the idea back and forth and network between them. I remember when we first got a computer network. Oh my God, look, this thing you type and email goes everywhere. So Tom Greco and I were busy using this network to try and create a hallelujah. Here we go. That didn't happen.